Hello, everyone, and welcome to Next Level Leadership, a live stream series to support leaders during this crisis. Last week's episode was all about living with purpose. Warren taught us three things. He talked to us about pursuing purpose with passion. We learned that purpose drives our sense of resolve. And the third thing was purpose takes our lives to a higher level. And that is the purpose of this series with Warren. Today is episode 7, Act with Intent, where Warren Rustand will share ways to act with intent during this crisis to continue the momentum of your life. Each week we introduce Warren. Many of you have seen Warren speak, you've attended events, and it always goes something like this. Here's Warren. But for those of you that haven't met Warren Rustand, he is former CEO of Providence Service Corporation. He has served as member of board of directors of over 50 public, private, and non-for-profit companies. Warren served as appointments secretary to President Ford, global chairman of WPO, co-founder and dean of faculty at the Entrepreneurs Organization Leadership Academy. Countless awards, Sports Hall of Fame, White House Fellow, but the award he treasures the most is Father of the Year in his hometown of Tucson, Arizona. This is a conversation. Please post your questions. Also, tell us where you're joining from. Share this next level leadership with your teams, with your communities. And thank you for all being here. We are all in this together. Here's Warren.
Thank you, Winnie. It's great to be with you again. I'm excited to have today's conversation. I hope it's casual, laid back, and easy for all of us. And I hope you'll participate by submitting your questions, your comments, your thought, the chat box. Please give us your best thinking about the subject we're talking about. This is really a dialogue, not a monologue. And so we want to be able to respond to as many questions as we can. Last night, I was reviewing some of the comments that we've had over these many episodes, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments, many, many questions. And I'll try to get to all those individually, even if we can't do it while we have these conversations. Today, the subject is act with intent. Intentionality is really important. And I wanted to share with you a poem that I like very much that expresses our sense of our intent, perhaps. We build on foundations we did not lay. We warm ourselves by fires we did not light. We sit in the shade of trees we did not plant. We drink from wells we did not dig. We profit from persons we did not know. This is as it should be. Together we are more than any one person could be. Together we can build across the generations. Together we can renew our hope and faith in life that is yet to unfold. Together we can heed the call to a ministry of care and justice. We are ever bound in community. May it always be so. The notion of being bound in community has never been more focused than it is right now. We see people reaching out and caring in a very intentional way, acting with intent, caring for others, submitting themselves to others, subordinating themselves to the majority and to the good. That's why we're sheltering in place. That's why we're in our compounds, in our homes, in our apartments and our complexes, right? We're doing what we've been asked to do. And so in this sense of community, we're all struggling together in this crisis, not only to understand it, but to comply in a way that's beneficial for the whole or for the community. As we talk about intent, I'd like to use a personal example. My grandfather's name was Ole Rustand, and he immigrated from Norway with his wife, and they settled on a small farm in Minnesota, which is where I grew up. And Grandpa Ole was a wonderful man. He had lots of energy. He was happy. And he would burst out of the house in the morning early to go milk the cows in the barn. And on the way to milking the cows in the barn, he noticed that the tractor that had broken down the day before was sitting in the yard. And so he diverted himself to go over to the tractor to get it fixed. And then as he approached the tractor, he walked by the chicken coop and he noticed the chickens were restless because they hadn't been fed and watered yet. So he walked away from the tractor and started to open the door to the chicken coop when his gaze caught the fact that the bull for the herd of cows had broken out of the fence and was standing there and needed to get back in the fence. So he quickly shut the door to the chicken coop and went to get the bull. And as he was on his way to get the bull and move the bull back into the pasture, he saw that the water tank was overflowing because a pipe had burst. Well, you get the picture. He had great intent. It's just that not much got done. And isn't intent something that's interesting for us? Because all of us have good intent. I intended to work out this morning. I intended to call my mother. I intended to fix that relationship, but yet we don't act on that intent. And so, as I said in a previous conversation, intent standing alone is simply insufficient. Intent is nice feeling, intent is nice thought, but unless it's followed by action and unless it's followed by results, it doesn't really matter much. And so this notion of acting with intent is a core part of achievement. It's really important for us to get it done. Intent is a critical piece. Real intent is a critical piece of all that we want to do and all of our hopes and dreams. And intent focuses our senses in a way that allows us to have action, which allows us to have outcomes. I know in small ways, we do this in our own home, and perhaps you do too. I know that every morning, my wife and I, we decided a long time ago, many years ago, that whoever gets up last makes the bed. But the bed is always made in the morning. Frequently, I do that. And we always want that to be done well and our room picked up such that whenever we come back from a day's labor, a day's work, and we walk into our bedroom, that everything is neat and in place. And therefore, at least one thing will have gone well during the day. The same thing is true in the evening. My wife takes her evening bath, and when she's taking her evening bath, I go into our bedroom and I prepare the bed for her to go to sleep. She goes to bed 30 minutes before I do. And so I fold back the comforter and I turn down the sheets and I fluff her pillow and get it ready for her to go to bed, go to sleep, so that it's comfortable for her. Now, why do I do that? Why do we do the bed in the morning and do the bed in the evening? Very simple. Our intent. My intent is to honor my wife and to make things easier for her. Our intent collectively is to be sure that our bedroom always looks good and is always organized and neat. And so our intent drove our action, which delivered our results. And so intentionality, acting with intent, becomes really critical. So the first step to understand about intent is that intentionality matters in all things, large and small. All things, large and small. That our intent is critical to achieving results. Now, intent is just a thought. And you recall a few sessions ago, I held up a book that said, "As a man thinketh." And the completion of that, "as a man thinketh," is so he becomes, right? It's this notion that our very thoughts decide who we are and what we'll do, as long as we act on those thoughts, as long as we act on that intent. And so that's a very important thought process for us to have. So if you're sitting there today just listening to me, let's think for a second. What is it you do today with real intent? You might write it down, or you might even submit it in the chat box. What is it you do today with real intent, real focused intent, that then allows you to take action, that then allows you to drive your outcomes? That real intent is important. And as we sit here today in this crisis, what is your intent as we come out of this crisis? What is your intentional thoughts that will drive the action, which will give you results? Because that planning, that futuristic thinking is really important for us to be doing during the middle of this crisis. Because if we're just consumed with present tense, if we're just consumed with current state, our mind will not allow us to embrace the future, which is really where all of the activity is going to take place, that's going to heal us, that's going to benefit us, that's going to create new opportunities for us. And so our ability to focus our intent on the future becomes very important to the actions that we'll take, which will drive our results. So as you think about that, I hope you'll think about the kind of future that you want to have whenever this ends. And as I've said before, I think this is a longer journey, not a shorter journey. Until we have wide-scale testing and until we have a vaccine that is reliable and tested with human trials, it's going to be very difficult to go back to the previous world or go back to any semblance of the previous time we had. So it's prepare for the longer haul, not the shorter haul. The second step then is intentionality of thought plus action drives outcomes. That it's a formula. Intentionality of thought drives action, which delivers outcomes. Okay, so it's an important process to link those three things together: thought, action, outcome. An example of that historically might be going back to 1963, when President John F. Kennedy stood before the nation in the United States and said, "We will land a man on the moon in this decade and bring him back safely." At the moment he said that, we had neither the resources nor the development of technology, the booster rockets, nor the capsules necessary to do it. And the end of the decade was just 7 years away. And yet his intentionality drove action, which produced outcomes. Because in July of 1969, many of us, some of you too young who are on this call, but you've seen the documentation and the documentaries, right, saw Neil Armstrong step on the moon as the first man to do so and return to Earth safely. So his intentional thought plus action delivered outcomes. So I think whenever we do that, we have to appreciate that setting goals is a part of our intentional thought. There's a poem I like very much that maybe I can share with you. As we pause to think of something that sets some of us apart, it seems to me that goals in life must be the place to start. Imagine playing football on an unmarked field of green, not a goal line to be sought, not a goal post to be seen. It would be an aimless battle where there's nothing to be gained, not a score to strive for, not a score to be attained. We must have purpose in our lives, for the flame that warms the soul is an everlasting vision. Every one of us must have a goal. Goals are thoughts with intent, when turned to action, become our outcomes. So I'm hopeful that we'll have the opportunity to express our intent, act on our intent, and get the outcomes that we hope to have. A friend of mine living in Denver, Colorado, his name happens to be Rourke Denver. For 20 years of his life, retiring last August 2019, he was a Navy SEAL. Before that time, as a high school student, he wanted to go to Syracuse University, which he did. And while at Syracuse, he became a great All-American lacrosse player. During the 4 years he was at Syracuse, his team played for the national championship in the United States 4 times, winning twice. He became National Player of the Year on 2 occasions. Rourke had set as his intent to become a Navy SEAL. He was scholastically prepared, he was athletically prepared, and he had his mind prepared. And so he applied for the Navy SEALs, and he was rejected. It didn't change his intent. He didn't understand it, but he simply reapplied the next year, and he was accepted. He applied and was accepted with about 127 other men who wanted to become Navy SEALs. At the end of the Navy SEAL training, only 25 of them became Navy SEALs. And I asked Rourke, "Did you ever think you wouldn't make it?" And he simply said, "No. It was my intent to be a Navy SEAL. Therefore, I acted to become a Navy SEAL. Therefore, I became a Navy SEAL." Our intent drives action, which produces results. Now, not always in the way that we want, because there are external forces that could come to play. We may have one intentionality, and this pandemic came to play, and it played in a different way, and it's going to alter our outcomes. But we largely have control over those things that we can aspire to. And as we deliver our aspirations, as we think about our future now going forward, the opportunity for us to deliver on our intent is pretty significant. So I hope that we can catch the spirit of acting with intent, that it's so important, not just to feel good about having the right intentions, but it's to act on the right intentions to deliver the right results. Intentionality drives those actions. So the third step is that intentionality is the first step in achievement. We can't have achievement without intentionality. And so how we think intentionally becomes really important to what we ultimately achieve in our lifetime. As we think about the results that we'd like to have after this pandemic, after this crisis we're in, we need to focus it in realism. We need to do an analysis of where we are, what our status is, what resources we have to deal with. But I think we'll all agree that there's a new world coming at us, and we need to prepare as mightily as we can. Last night, about 10 o'clock, as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about today again, and trying to make it meaningful for you and I to have this conversation, my wife came to me and said, I've read this poem, and it seems to me that it might be appropriate for your discussion tomorrow about intentionality. And as I read it, I was sobered by it because it came from a different time and place. So let me read this and see if it doesn't remind you of where we are today during this crisis and how we might be thinking. And people stayed at home and read books and listened, and they rested and did exercises and made art and played and learned new ways of being and stopped and listened more deeply. Someone meditated, someone prayed, someone saw their shadow, and people began to think differently. And in the absence of people who lived in ignorant ways, dangerous, meaningless, and heartless, the earth also began to heal. And when the danger ended and people found themselves again, they grieved for the dead and made new choices and dreamed new visions and created new ways of living and completely healed the earth, just as they were healed. This is a poem that was written in 1869 and not widely circulated until following the 1918-1919 pandemic that swept the world, where it became widely read and understood. The notion is healing. And are we really in a healing period? Is this forced time together with our families healing our families? Is this time in thinking about our colleagues and employees in new and sensitive ways a healing process in and of itself? And are we healing our relationships with our families and extended families? And are we healing our time with our neighbors, our community, and our sense of community? And is this a healing time for us? There are great things that come from tragedies, difficulties, and crisis. And I believe we're in a period of developing our own greatness as we respond to that which we're experiencing. I think you and I will be better people because of what we experience. And I'll say again, this is hard. This is difficult. This is challenging. But it's testing us at our core. It's asking us to be our best. It's telling us we need to be a better version of ourselves, that we have unlimited and untapped potential, and that if we'll use that, we will create the new world. We will create the new normal. Why don't we have some questions? Winnie, I turn it back to you, and thank you for all your help.
Thank you, Warren, especially this whole idea of healing time. And I know that I speak from everyone that's here today with us, that thank you for this time to help us be better versions of ourselves. So thank you from everyone. We have people here today from St. Louis, St. Louis, Houston, Tanzania, Los Angeles, Chicago, Mexico, Singapore, Romania, Ohio, Idaho, New York City, Kenya, and just phenomenal. I want to share a few things that people posted about their intentions. Odette Dianello says that I create my day with meditation. Jamie Draghi, I create my day with intent by a walk in thought before sunrise. Susie Hall, I create my day with intent through meditation, prayer, journaling, and reading. Thank you. First question comes from, actually I'm going to pose a question from last week that I missed from Marcia Rawls, and I think it's relevant today because you're talking about the long journey, that this is not a short journey. And her question was, in this long journey, what would you tell a young leader of college age about the current time in this world?
First is to be very observant and learn all you can. There are great lessons that come in crisis, great lessons in times of difficulty. And sometimes we get so consumed with a crisis, we fail to learn. Be a student during this time. All of us should be. Even at my age, I'm learning new things because of this crisis. And I think each of us, the first step is learning. Learn what we can. The second is think about how we can apply those in our lives going forward. What did I learn in the crisis that's going to enable me to overcome crisis in the future? Because the guarantee for young people is that you will have crisis and adversity and challenge in your life. Absolutely guaranteed. Ask anyone over the age of 40, and we will all tell you crisis is absolutely going to happen. It could be personal, could be family, it could be a pandemic, it could be regional, it could be local. But we are all going to be faced with this crisis. So learn and learn how to apply what you've learned. And then learn to engage with others in constructive dialogue and community-spirited activities. Learn to serve others. Because when these crises come, we can look around and we will see our neighbors and our family and others who need help worse than we need help. And we need to extend to them the hand of fellowship and the hand of help and service, which will enable them to overcome something as well. And I think those are the great lessons that we're getting right now. It's wonderful to see how many people care about other people. What a great gift that is during this time. And how we've set aside pettiness and jealousies and controversy and stupidity to say, you know what, there's a greater good here, and I'm about the greater good. So let's learn to do that.
Thank you, Warren. We have Miranda Nyman from Tanzania. Her question is, what is the most valuable lesson you have learned from a past crisis?
Wow, I've been in a lot of interesting times and challenging times. So I was on a trip to Australia. I got on the airplane, felt a little achy, but I got on the airplane anyway because I had business in Australia. And so it's a 14-hour flight, and about 7.5 hours into the flight, it became obvious to me that I was in crisis, that I couldn't swallow, I couldn't digest, I couldn't urinate, I couldn't defecate, I couldn't do anything, right? My body was shutting down. We informed the pilot, and obviously there's a lot of water between here and Australia. There was no place to land, and so we had to continue the destination. I got there, and they carried me off the plane and took me to the person who was there to greet me, Phil Scanlon, a good friend in Australia. And Phil said, "You look terrible. You look sick." I said, "I am." We went right to his doctor. His doctor said, what are your symptoms? I told him, and he said, "I think I know what you have because I've had it myself. I think you have sepsis." Sepsis is a virus that has a 73% mortality rate within the first 24 hours. I was 22 hours into it at that time. I went to a disease specialist. They confirmed the diagnosis. I was put in a hospital in Sydney, Australia, where I spent the next 15 days. So here's what I learned. I learned that in times of crisis, we have to share that knowledge with others so they can help us. All right, so they can help us. Don't go it alone. The second thing is have friends and supporters around you who are willing to sacrifice for you. Phil Scanlon, my friend, had another bed put in my hospital room. He stayed with me for 15 days, to be sure. I was on the death watch for the first 4 days. They didn't think I was going to make it. The second is to be sure that you're strong enough to overcome this crisis. Build your strength. That means working out, eating well, sleeping well, but it means building your resilience, your thoughts, right? What you read, how we think about life, so that when crisis hits, you're prepared to overcome it, that you won't succumb to it, right? And then the last thing is to use all of the assets that you have at your disposal to recover as quickly as possible and resume your life with your family and others. So I learned from a very personal crisis that nearly killed me the things that I have to do going forward. And it's made me better in every aspect of my life. That crisis, that tragedy, that difficulty has allowed me to lead a better, more complete life as a result of that. And in that process, what we all learn is what's really important. You know what we're learning right now in this crisis is what's really important to us, what really matters. And in almost every case, it's our personal relationships and it's our family. So let's not, going forward, allow our families to become second place. Let's not allow our primary relationships with spouses and significant others to take a back seat to making money or material things. Let's elevate them to the position they have in our lives, which is the most important thing we have.
Thank you, Warren. And a couple of other, Manila, we have Bahrain, Beirut, we have Malaysia. So many great questions. And you mentioned something, I believe it was in the last session, about asking for help. And you just reminded me today that I hope that everyone that is with us today just knows that we're all here for each other, and that if you need help, please post something in the chat. And I hope that everyone will commit to responding to those. So we are all in this together. So thank you for that reminder. Thank you. Our next question comes from Adam Glickman. How can we use our core values and/or purpose to drive intent?
Adam, thank you. It's great to hear from you again. I think you asked a question in our last session as well. I think, first of all, we need to clearly define our purpose and understand what our purpose is. For me, it's improving the human condition wherever I find it. That's my personal purpose statement. It's been that for decades. And so wherever I see people in need, I try to help. I do my best to make their situation or circumstance better. And so our purpose is clearly defined. We understand who we are and what we're about. We add to that then our values. That's how we behave every day. And I talked about associating with people who are the same on stage and off stage. I talked about the need to find people who are consistent, predictable, and constant across their life, driven by their values. And all of us might have slightly different values. We define what those values are, but we can tell what the values of a person are by how they act and how they conduct themselves, right? The greatest statement a person can make is by allowing me to watch them act and behave, and I will tell you what their values are. So first, clearly define our individual purpose, perhaps even our family purpose, and then fix those values that drive our behavior and be consistent with those. We've always wanted to be around people who walk the talk. The most difficult person to be around is the person who says one thing but acts differently. And so each of us needs to be consistent. Do we all struggle with that? Absolutely. Have I struggled with that? Certainly. It's a challenge to be the person we really know we need to be and want to be, that our values express. And we all fall short of that at different times. We fail miserably sometimes, but we have the ability to get up. We have the ability to dust ourselves off and do it again. And that crisis that we're in right now, this pandemic that we're experiencing, coronavirus, is teaching us that in spades. It's teaching us how to dust ourselves off, to get up. The only time we really fail is when we fail to get up. So let's get up. We got another go round. We got stuff ahead of us to do. There are people expecting things from us. We can do the things we want to do, no matter how difficult our circumstances today.
Thank you, Warren. So that ties in with a question from Katty Duragi, and you're talking about getting up and being there for your team. And she says, how do we encourage our team members to look at this time as an opportunity to heal, to reflect, and to set intentions and not be derailed by fear?
Katty, thank you. You're one of the great leaders for entrepreneurs in the world, and a great friend of mine. I really appreciate it. I think number one is we have to show them. We have to act that way. We have to be that person. I think it was Gandhi that said, be the change the world needs, right? So we have to be the change. We have to be the person. We have to show the caring. We have to show the way. That's what leadership is about. That's what we need to do. That's why we're on this call together, because we're leaders. We're trying to understand better, to refine ourselves, to be that strong and good leader. And so I think the most important thing a leader does is how they act every day. It's not what they say, it's how they act. And I think we can go and watch a group of leaders for an extended period of time, and we could tell those who are acting out their beliefs and values, those who are giving service to others, those who are helping others in their journey. There are some who are selfish and concerned about me and I. I think the world is about us and we and ours. We should try to eliminate the words I, me, my, because they're narcissistic in their orientation. We sometimes use them to describe something, understand that. But as a thought process, when we talk about intentionality, let's intentionally talk about we, us, ours. I always am thoughtful about how, when I'm listening to people speak about their families, how many people say my children, my wife, my home. I've always been raised that those are our children. That's our home, that we do this together. And I think it's more inclusive and it's more powerful. And so I think as leaders, we have to show that example. And when we show that example, people will follow and will like who they're following.
Thank you, Warren. Kyle Campbell, his question is about how do we act with intent as our young family storms? My intent to journal, meditate, exercise is thrown off due to the morning storm. My 3-year-old awake at 5 as soon as I move. And by the way, we just gave him his first journal.
Well, aren't little kids great? It's terrific. You may or may not know that we have 7 children. And my wife and I figured out at one point we'd gone 22 years without sleeping through the night, that there was always at least one child pitter-pattering down the hall and joining us in bed and wanted to talk or wanted to stay up or wanted to get us up early. So here's what I determined over a period of time, that I simply had to get up earlier. If I wanted private time, if the children were getting up at 6, then I had to be up at 5. If they're getting up at 6:30, I had to be up at 5:30. But I had to be up an hour earlier before they were to get a workout and to get my reading done, to do my meditation and or gratefulness, to do my journaling and so forth. So I just had to do that. And I just decided that that was the exception I would make, and that was healthy for me. And by the way, I think healthier for the family and my relationship with the children as well. The better person I am, the better I am for other people. And so I just decided that's what I had to do. And while that's easy to talk about and easy to say, it's darn hard to do. And it was hard to get up some mornings, right? When I hadn't slept through the night or when the kids were in bed with us or whatever. But when I made it an absolute in my life changed. My life got better. I was just a better person. When I could spend 10 minutes in gratefulness, 10 minutes in inspirational reading, and 10 minutes journaling, I became a better person. And that's been true of my whole life. And so I think we just have to go do that. So I wish you well. 5-year-olds are great. And I hope they use this journal really well and that you show them how to use it. But I'll tell you what, it's a beautiful thing to have children. It's a beautiful thing to do the things you know you have to do for yourself, to be that person for your children.
Bill Benishek, definitely a challenge to act with intention. But what a great feeling I have when I realize that I did something intentional that aligned with my values. And to forgive myself when I did something that did not align with my values, and to learn and grow from it. How do we learn from forgiveness?
You know, Bill, you raised something really interesting. And I talk about this often, that the most important thing is to forgive ourselves. And then we have to do that before we can forgive other people. We are imperfect beings in an imperfect world. And we're doing the best we can with the resources we've been given. And I think that we have to be willing to regularly forgive ourselves. I, like you, make mistakes. And the quicker we can forgive ourselves and the sooner we can forgive others, the better we are for that experience. Now, I had an experience where I needed to forgive someone. Someone had stolen some money from me, and I needed to forgive someone. And it's a longer story, but to tell you that when I forgave them, it was this 1,000-pound weight had been taken off my shoulders, because then I had transferred everything to that person, and that person now had to deal with it. As long as I could forgive that person, I was going to be okay. And so I think it's necessary for us to progress as human beings to know that forgiveness is a big part of our journey. First ourselves, then others, as I said. And when we do that, we cleanse ourselves of the toxicity that exists from doing things that we didn't intend to do, or doing things stupidly or in a not thinking way, or just doing things in the normal course where we overlook things. You and I have the power of forgiveness, and we need to utilize that in a very precise way. I'm glad you know that. And I'm glad you're using that, Bill.
Thank you. This one's from the Philippines. Jonathan Derek Engte. He says, hello, Warren. Hello from the Philippines. What is the best way to preserve and persevere if external factors are just too strong to stop us from achieving results we intend to achieve? And do we pivot and change our intent instead?
Jonathan, good to hear from you. You live in one of my favorite places. You are aware that our youngest son, Clark, lived for 2 years in Quezon City in the Philippines and speaks your native language of Tagalog. And he and I were talking yesterday about his time there and how much he enjoyed it. He came back with me when I spoke to the EO chapter there, and he had a wonderful time, and it was great to be back. And so I look forward to my next trip. I think sometimes our best intentions run into roadblocks. And those roadblocks sometimes cause us to detour, sometimes to change intentions. I hope that when we are thoughtful about our intentions and we contemplate the actions we have to take for those intentions, that we can then see the results and feel the results that we will get and do get by following that sequence. Are there things from time to time that cause us to abort that? Yes, that happens. We're living in such a time right now. We could have had the best intentions for our business and our family. We knew the actions we were going to take, and boom, all of a sudden we're in a global pandemic that's got us staying at home, abandoning our businesses, really making it difficult for us. I think sometimes we have to change our intentions to find our way around that which is thrown in front of us, but not too often. Most of the time, I believe with clear thinking, clear intentionality, we can define the actions we have to take, and then we can drive the outcomes to a great degree that we want to have. I think we're in control of more of our life than we allow ourselves to think. Too often we are fault finding or we're pointing fingers. Sometimes if our child is not playing enough on the football team, it's the coach's fault. And sometimes if the child's not doing well academically, it's the teacher's fault. And sometimes when we aren't achieving our goals in business or in family, it's always someone else's fault. Let's accept full accountability and responsibility for our intent, our actions, and our outcomes. And when we do that, our life gets a whole lot better, faster. I hope that answers your question. Thank you, Jonathan.
All right, so we have, let's see, I'll do two more. Charles Bender. He says, with your family, how do you see how setting intentions and follow through work, and how does that impact your self-confidence and esteem?
Well, it impacts self-confidence and esteem greatly. If we do what we say we're going to do, if we set our intentions and then follow through, we feel great about it because we've done what we said we were going to do. Where we feel bad and guilty is when we set our intentions and then never do it. It's like I said, I meant to call my mom. I intended to call my mom. I intended to make up with my best friend that I hurt. But some of the things you never get around to, those are what we feel guilty about. That's what we feel bad about. What we feel good about is setting an intention, taking the action, and then seeing the results. So our family motto is, we do hard things. So the Rustand family believes that if we can get through the hard stuff, the rest of life is pretty good. And so we set our intention to do hard things. When hard things come, we take pride in getting through the tough stuff. And sometimes that's little things, and sometimes it's big things. But right now, as you know, our family's going through a hard thing. The hard thing is that we have a grandson in the middle of Russia who has the coronavirus and is battling for his life. That's a hard thing for a family to go through. For us as grandparents, for his parents, our second youngest son and his wife and their 3 daughters, it's a very challenging time. But our motto is, we do hard things, and we do it well. We do it with compassion. We do it with understanding. We do it with intent, but we do hard things. And our family will get through this and do this as well as we can under the circumstances. And I think that affects our purpose. I think it affects everything we think about as a family and as individuals. Chuck, I hope that answers your question. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon. You're a great guy.
Warren, how's he doing? How's your grandson?
His worst and most difficult days were Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and into Monday. He was able to get some stuff that has helped bring the fever down a degree or two. We'll talk to him tomorrow. We're very hopeful that we get a good report that he's feeling better. The last weekend was touch and go and was very difficult. But we're very encouraged by what's happening, and we're excited to talk to him tomorrow.
Thank
you for asking.
Thank you. And so many comments in the thread today about just people's thoughts, their prayers. Your entire family is being considered with everyone, and everyone is really thinking about you and hope that everything works out.
We're so grateful for that. Thank you. We feel the power of that.
One more question. This is from Naranjan Shrestha. How can we make crisis as opportunities to rise and win?
Rajan, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon. First of all, the statement I believe in is that crisis creates opportunity. I think we have to look historically to just see things that have developed and things that have changed, individuals and organizations that have become really outstanding and great during crisis and coming out of crisis. I think part of that is taking the lessons that we're learning from the crisis and then focusing them forward to apply those lessons in a way that make it beneficial. Some companies during this crisis have quickly pivoted and are doing new things right away with whatever intelligence and resources they have. That's not possible for every business. Not every business can pivot, but all of us can learn things from this crisis that are going to make us stronger and better going forward. The challenge is when we give in to the crisis, when we allow the crisis to overcome us, when we get paralyzed by fear, indecision, indecisiveness, right? Where we are just stuck. And we need to get unstuck as soon as possible. And the way we can do that is by talking to our colleagues, our family, our friends, sharing in a very vulnerable way where we are and allowing them to help us move forward. In the same way that if we're feeling particularly strong during crisis, we need to reach out to help those who are more vulnerable and make sure they get forward. I think we have the power to do that. It takes a lot of real resilience which has been built over years, right? Over years. And I think that if we do that, I think that we have the possibility of coming through this in an extraordinary way. From a business perspective, we will see new opportunities that were not known to us or were unfamiliar to us as we entered the crisis. For example, there are many people who are just unfamiliar with online education or the ability to communicate effectively with people online, who are now using those vehicles in new and different ways. What will education look like as we come out of this? Will it be different? And is that something that will create success for some people if they can figure that out and determine that? What will change for families? How they purchase things, right? How they act and interact. What entertainment they will attend or not attend. How they will get that entertainment. What they will do and not do going forward. How they'll shop for groceries, for example. What will be delivered to their home versus driving to get it. There are all kinds of interesting nuances and subtleties to learnings that we have during a crisis that will be applied to other people's success coming out of the crisis. So give a lot of thought, as we are in our business, give a lot of thought to what the new world is going to be like. What is fundamentally going to change? And then how do we play into that in a way that makes a contribution and provides success going forward? So I think it's a whole new world. It's going to be an interesting time. There are great challenges with it. We got to get through the crisis in order to realize that future, but begin thinking about that future now, however far in the future it might be. So thank you very much for being with us today. I hope something I've said is helpful to you. Thank you for your questions. I really appreciate that. Importantly, thank you for your prayers and your meditation and your thoughts about our family at this time. We greatly appreciate that. And the summary of today is this: acting with intent is critically important. First, intentionality matters in all things, large and small. Second, intentionality of thought plus action equals outcomes. And third, intentionality is the first step in achievement. On Monday, we're going to be talking about make conscious choices, another leadership principle. We look forward to talking to you then. Have a wonderful few days before we meet again on Monday. And I can't tell you how much I'm thinking about all of you and wishing all of you great success, happiness, and resilience as we come through this tough process.